Here I am in SODO. In my opinion, maybe the coolest neighborhood in Seattle. It speaks for itself. Look at this view. As you can probably tell, SODO is Seattle's industrial neighborhood. And unsurprisingly, it is not the most welcoming place. It is a loud, noisy, stinky. There's a lot going on. There's cars driving everywhere. That's also kind of what makes this place unique, you know? So yeah, I truly believe that SODO is a paradox. I mean, look at this place. It is some of the most, frankly, ugly industrial commercial land with this big, wide, ugly road with one of the best views there is of the Seattle skyline. And to show what I mean, here's my favorite photo ever titled Waiting Man. It's just a dude waiting at the bus stop, but it really does show this place off and why I think this place is so unique. But it didn't always look like this. Okie dokie. Here we are at the UW wetlands. This is near UW campus, obviously. And this gives you a slight approximation of what maybe SODO looked like back in the day. It was very flat land, plenty of small streams running through, and it was also tide flat. So basically what that means is during low tide, the ocean recedes and you have a whole bunch of land. And then that all gets filled in when the tide goes up, fills in all that land with water, and then you have basically no land. Yeah, they obviously wanted to fill in this land. They started about in the late 1800s. You can see here in 1897, they have a good start on the Pioneer area. They're filling a lot of those flats. And by 1909, they have a great start on one of the canals, and they have filled in a lot of the land. And by present day, we have two distinct canals, and the vast majority of these flats are completely filled in. Now, obviously, this was a hugely impactful project. This is pretty valuable land. It's SODO, South Downtown, so that's pretty valuable land. There's lots of industry and everything. The impact of this project cannot be overstated. So later on in this video, we will be talking about who was impacted by it, how they filled it in, and then some conclusions to base off of that. But for now, that's really about it. Here I am, and obviously this is native land. I am at the mouth of the Duwamish River, and these all used to be mud flats, and they were very important mud flats, not only because they showed the natural environment, but it's home to the native people, the Duwamish tribes namely. And obviously that's where we get the namesake from this place from, and their chief Seath is actually the namesake for this city. So very important, and this land was very important to them. A quote that stood out to me that showed this was from Warren King, a prominent tribal member, said, quote, "This was part of our food source. It was our grocery store. But now we have completely filled it in, obviously." So even going beyond that, the city of Seattle made promises to them. They basically made an agreement. We'll move you across the sound. It'll be for your own benefit, and we'll help you pay for it and everything. But the city of Seattle did not keep those promises. But a prominent settler in Seattle, Doc Maynard, was friends with Chief Seath and good friends with the native people, spoke their language and everything. And he really wanted to keep those promises for obvious reasons. So he ended up selling a lot of his land and everything and trying to help them out the best he could. And he is labeled, quote, an Indian lover and everything like that. He was just so sick of it. He ended up moving over to Alki. So really not the best situation. Even nowadays, we haven't done too much to remedy the situation. The Duwamish people are still not officially recognized as a tribe. So yeah. This really is the paradox facing most American cities, right? Because you can't tell where this land came from. Look around. It's all industrial property, which is interesting, but it certainly isn't what the land used to be. It doesn't look like it used to be one of the most important places. And I think, honestly, they probably want you to forget that history, because then you have to face the fact that this is stolen land, and there's just no real way to reconnect with it. They have literally canaled it all up. It's all covered in concrete. It's completely privatized. Well, for the most part. So yeah, I don't have too much more to say beyond that. So here I am with the great view of the mud flats, or SODO. And from up here you can see all the warehouses. And this is obviously not always what it looked like. Before they filled in the mud flats, they built over the mud flats. So here's a picture taken in the year 1900. So these tracks also tell a really interesting story. Back in like 1873, Arthur Denny, founding father of Seattle, got a telegram basically saying, hey, we're gonna build tracks, but they're gonna end in Tacoma and not Seattle. Obviously, the good people of Seattle, Washington were none too pleased, but they're like, let's do something about it. The Seattle spirit was strong. They always were building these ambitious projects. Basically, they said, we'll build our own rail line. We'll build it from here in Seattle all the way down to Walla Walla. And if you don't know, that was never gonna happen. If you've ever driven down I-90, you know how steep those mountains are, especially how crazy it gets in the winter. They were never gonna finish that project. Say what you will, they were very ambitious. The Seattle spirit was strong. Well, obviously they never finished the project. They did make it over to the Redmond, Newcastle area, which is not nothing. That is a significant distance. It was still a very good project, and these tracks did come in handy. Now, when they built these flats, I think it's pretty interesting how they did it. They basically had these big 40-foot barge boat thingies with huge hammers on them. Basically, they would hammer Douglas firs into the ground, and they would do that obviously several hundred times, and then build a wharf on top of that, and bam, 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 you got yourself some train tracks. But yeah, this project, while important, does signify the beginning of the end for these mud flats. Okie dokie, I am here in Pioneer Square in downtown Seattle. This is the oldest, most historical part of our downtown, and you don't know, Seattle used to also be a lumber town. This part of downtown, the southern part of downtown, used to be dominated by lumber mills. And obviously these lumber mills create a lot of sawdust and waste, and we're better to dump it in the flats. A good rule of thumb in early Seattle is if you have extra material, you dump it in the flats, okay? So they're dumping all this material into the flats, and it created a lot of brand new land, and it also had the benefit of being perfectly flat. Because if you don't know, industry, you want perfectly flat land that we can ship things back and forth. It makes it super easy. Houses, it might even be desirable to build up hills, because then you get great views of the Elliott Bay and everything else. They were creating all this brand new flat land, but they didn't want to use it. All this land, it was mainly home to a lot of undesirable quote-unquote people, especially Chinese laborers. By 1880, they made like 13% of the workforce. And even by then, that was a significant portion of the land, and they lived here. So they didn't expand pretty much just due to racism and discrimination, which is kind of why I call this place a paradox, because you have this new land. It's clearly very useful, but you're not even going to bother using it. Like, come on. And a similar thing happened right over here in Pioneer Square. I literally almost forgot to record this part of the video. So here we are, Pioneer Square. This place pretty much burnt to the ground back in 1889. Yeah, 1889, the Great Seattle Fire. And yeah, not a great situation, but very impressively, they managed to pretty much rebuild everything within a year, and actually had a population increase of 1/3 back in that same time span, which is honestly extremely impressive. Anyway, so they rebuilt really quick, and they also used this as an excuse to change how they designed this area of downtown. So if you don't know, there's the underground city here in Seattle. So they literally built on top of the old downtown, built it 1 story taller. This is because they're experiencing a lot of flooding. Like I said, this was built on a lot of tide flats. So they're creating so much flooding. They're like, let's just build on top of it. It'll be a net benefit. So yeah, that's really cool. Okay. Anyway, so they built on top of this, and this created a lot of rubble, and they could literally dump that into the flats, because remember, say it with me, if you have extra material, you dump it in the flats. But that's really about it. Transition to Ballast Island. So Ballast Island, if you don't know what a ballast is, it's like counterweights at the bottom of ships back in the day, because they were really big, had those big sails. They didn't want the ship tipping over, so they put counterweights at the bottom. And they needed a place to dump those, namely as like big stones and boulders, so they would just dump it here, because these were flats back in the day. And remember, if you have extra material, you dump it in the flats. Boulders kept accumulating and created what we call Ballast Island. Look at these historical photos back in the day. So there's a whole bunch of like docked canoes and boats and stuff like that, and a lot of them were from the native people, because this is a great refuge for them and many other like undesired left behind groups similar to that. So the native people took this place as a refuge. Their longhouses not long before this were actually burnt down, not only by the settlers, but by the US Army, which is kind of alarming. But yeah, this became a great refuge for them. Nowadays, it does not look what it used to look back then. It is home to the ferry terminal and some nice footpaths, the new Alaskan Way project and stuff like that. So overall, an interesting place, and this also used to be mud flat that is filled in. Okie dokie, so here I am at Lumen Field, formerly known as CenturyLink, formerly known as Questfield, formerly the Kingdom, home to your Seattle Seahawks. Now this is an interesting place. It is home to Seattle's Hooverville. If you don't know what that is, President Hoover, back in the beginning of the Great Depression, was not well liked because, let's let's just say he could have done more to address the Great Depression, right? So this place was home to around 600 informal settlements and about 1,000 people or so. The brand new city council voted to, quote, tolerate this in 1932. But they had to compromise this. Basically, it was only home to men. They weren't really going to allow children or women. Occasionally, some women or children would be seen, but namely it's just men. And at that, it was older men and usually unemployed men. They had a lot less economic opportunity, stuff like that. But this just goes to, again, show that these mud flats have always been, quote, undesirable, and really just highlights the paradoxical nature of this place, right? Because they were like, it's so important to fill this in, we must fill this in, these mud flats are so important, but also yet it's home to the undesirables. Okay, here I am. It's only getting worse and worse lighting, and it is starting to rain, but that's okay, we're here, we're getting it done. There's this dude named Eugene Simple, and he is an interesting guy. He wanted to build a canal through Beacon Hill, which was theoretically a good idea because we need a canal connecting the Pacific Ocean and Lake Washington. It was a good idea, but awful execution because they would have had to cut through Beacon Hill in the year 1900. That was never gonna happen. Even I-90 has to go through the hill. Okie dokie, so this is Feature Logan. I do not think I made it very clear in the last shot. I was at the peak of Beacon Hill overlooking I-90 and I-5, the interchange. And here's a cool historical photo taken there. Hope you enjoyed that historical photo. And here I am overlooking Beacon Hill. That is Beacon Hill where they tried to carve the canal through. Now I can go back to present Logan. If I'm being completely honest, this was a stupid idea. There's no shot they could finish that project in 1900. But you know, they started digging away, and he used the Seattle spirit on his side. But also, the good people of Seattle could kind of tell maybe his intentions aren't in the best place. He's just doing that to profit, maybe not. But these allegations seem pretty true because he was forced to resign from the company in 1905. But the Seattle Lake Washington Water Co. continued on, and by 1917, they had filled in 92% of the flats, which is honestly quite impressive. And the beginning of this canal wasn't completely useless. Obviously, no ships ever went through, but it came in handy, at least to some extent, because it gave an obvious spot to build the spaghetti mess of an interchange between I-5 and Spokane Street. So you know what? I think all the white people benefited from this project. Overall, wasn't the worst. You know what? The importance of these projects cannot be overstated. SODO is one of the biggest transportation hubs here in Seattle, if not the biggest. As you can see, there's cargo trucks running everywhere. It's also absolutely caked in rail. There's rail everywhere. We have the Link 1 line, the Sounder, the Amtrak, and also it's home to BNSF and so much cargo rail. So this place is very important for that. It's also hugely important for automotive. The place is surrounded on either side by two of the most important highways in Seattle. Highway 99 over here, I-5 over here. So that all does wonders to connect the area. Also, there's 1st Avenue and 4th Avenue, which are two very important public transit corridors here in Seattle. And that also fails to mention, you know, the Port of Seattle, only like, what, the 5th biggest cargo hub in America? Something like that, at least. Okie dokie. So as I've said plenty of times throughout this video, the Duwamish Valley is very industrialized. There's industry everywhere. There's about 5,000 acres of industrial property, which is about 80% of the city's industrial land is just here in the Duwamish Valley. This creates plenty of jobs, about 80,000 working family wage jobs, which is great. Lots of families are fed through this place and all this industry. This can also be very clearly seen on a zoning map. If you look, there's industry all over this area, to plenty of local business, also some big box stores. So yeah, these two avenues are two huge commercial corridors. Kind of the dark side to all this industry, though, is that it has created plenty of pollution over the years. The Duwamish River and the air quality around here has not been the best. So it's been a huge point of emphasis, especially by the native peoples, to try to clean that up, which is a great idea and obviously should be supported. And also, unfortunately, still to this day, these mud flats are home to a lot of poverty, just quite frankly. The neighborhoods surrounding the Duwamish Valley are some of the most poor and ethnically diverse neighborhoods in Seattle. So these neighborhoods are great places, but it's just, like I said, there's plenty of poverty still, poverty-stricken areas. But that really just goes back to the historical theme of this place, right? There's plenty of poverty and ethnically diverse groups, and that has always been the theme of these mud flats. But yeah, that is really, I hope, the point I've been making throughout this video. A place can be very ugly, but also so beautiful. A place can be so overlooked, but yet just so important, you know? And that really is why I call SODO and the entire Duwamish Valley a paradox. That's it. That is it. Hey, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you found any topics in this video interesting or want to learn more about Seattle topography in general, do read this book, Too High and Too Steep. It's very interesting. It is literally purely about the topography of Seattle. It is what sparked my interest of this place beyond the fact that I just think it looks cool as a photographer. So this is my first video ever. I hope the voiceovers and everything look okay. I don't know if they do. Every source I used is down below in the description, and there's on-screen citations for everything. But yeah, that's really about it. Thank you for watching and have a great day.